This set of tryout keys is the Baxter Set 88. It is for the Ford double-sided 8-cut, and it says right here the X code series. So this is the right set of tryout keys for the lock that we are working on. But there are a couple of notes here. 8-cut Ford locks look different than other Ford double-sided locks. The opening in the face of the lock is a rectangle like this. It says, so except Ford Focus and 99 and up Mercury Cougar and any other 2003 and later Ford products that have this keyway. So if you see this keyway, then what they're saying is that these tryout keys will not work for these locks. These are the keys that make up the Baxter Set 88. There's 4 main groups, and then there's a small set for glove boxes for vehicles that have locking glove boxes, which sometimes can be helpful in determining a few of the cuts. But this truck doesn't have a locking glove box, so we're going to just put that aside. The 4 groups have tags that identify them as 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the first group is what you want to start with, will open over 57% of the vehicles, and the next group will open about 29%. So between just those 2 groups, we're at 85%, and then if these 2 don't do it, we go on to groups 3 and 4. But more than likely, you're going to find a key in one of the first 2 groups. This is the first key in the first set. Key is numbered 1 and 2. This is side 1, this is side 2. And which side you're actually using, of course, is significant, and I'll explain how to figure that out as we go along using this set of keys. Okay, so with this set of keys, you try both sides. Take the key, try it that way, and try the other side, until you find one that will turn the lock without too much force. Should not be real difficult to turn the lock. And there we have it. Now the cuts are different on the 2 different sides of the key. Notice that it's not going to work it this way. Okay, so which side are the cuts actually making the lock work? Now this key is numbered 59 and 60. Okay, so we see that the 60 is on the top and the 59 is on the bottom. We're not sure if it's 59 or 60 that is actually working the lock. So what we have to do is use this notch key that comes with the set. And the notch key will only go in so far from on one side and a little further on the other side. Now there's a little notch right here with a red mark in it. Okay, with the notch up, it goes this far in, and it's not going to be as easy to see with it being down, but with the notch down, it does not go in as far. That's the side that we're concerned with. So I'll do that again. We can see here the notch is pretty close to the front of the lock. And on this side, the notch is not as close. So if we go back to our key, we know it was the one that was down. Okay, this is the one that works it. So the key number 59 is the one that we're going to look up in the book. Now this is the instruction book for our set of tryout keys, and we discovered that it was key number 59 that turned the lock. So in the book it will tell us on key number 59. Okay, so we know that the minimum cuts are 242, 212. The max is 353, 313, and we have a number 1 cut in both of these on the number 5 position. So we know absolutely for sure what the number 5 position is. Okay, so the first key we cut to 242, 212, and we're going to try that and see if we can impression the key. Okay, so I have the key cut Again, I put a notch on the side where the number 1 cut is. We got 1 and 3 cuts on one side, 2, 4, and 6 on the other side. And then we're going to see if this will leave any impression marks. Okay, I got a good impression mark on number 6. So we're going to take number 6 down 1 more notch. Actually, I'm going to save this key, and I'm going to just cut a brand new key. I wouldn't normally do that, but for this video, I'm going to save the key, and so that I can show as much as I can what I'm seeing on the video. So I'm going to cut a brand new key, and then I'm going to lower the number 6 cut by 1 depth. Now this is extremely magnified, so I can show this mark in this cut here. This is the number 6 cut that we just got from impressioning the key. You look at the number 2, number 4 cuts, there's no marks. The same on the other side. This was the only mark really on the key. So we need to take that down. We can start by taking it down a half a depth, but it's such a strong mark, I'm going to go ahead and take it down a full depth from a 2 down to a 3. Now before you cut your second key, you want to make a note as to what changes are being made. We know this one's not going to change, so we're changing this 2 to a 3. So our new key will be 242 213. Again, I've got the number 1 side marked, the 1 and 3 cuts are down, and we took the number 6 cut down 1 depth. Now that turns it a lot more. Let's see if we can get another good impression mark. Actually, right there it just turned the lock to the right. It actually turned the lock, so it should have left us a good impression mark. Okay, it looks to me like there's a pretty good mark on the number 4. So we're going to take this down, this number 4 cut down 1 depth, and try it again. Okay, again, now this is pretty strong magnification. Here we have the 2 cut, the 4 cut, and the 6 cut. We've taken the 6 cut down. This is our second attempt at impressioning, and you can see we have a strong mark in the number 4 cut. So we need to take the number 4 cut down to a 3 also. Now I want to point out that you don't always get this strong of a mark, and this takes practice and it takes patience. I don't want to give the impression that impressioning keys is something that is easy to do. It takes practice. It's not a difficult skill if you practice it. Now we're going to make another change to our key, and it's going to be 2, 4, 2, 3, 1, 3. And we will then see if that key will work or if it will leave more impression marks. And that works the lock perfectly. Okay, now once we have the key working in this lock, we want to go ahead and try the other door locks to see if it will also work the other door locks, because just because it works in the one, especially if it's a worn lock, does not mean it will work in all of them. So we need to go ahead and check the other locks. But you want to remember which tumblers were in which locks. That with the first 6 cuts, we can only do the doors, and then if it were a vehicle that had a tailgate, we could do the tailgate. We could not do like a storage box or a glove box that may be locked. We can't do the ignition lock because we're still missing cuts 7 through 8. But any of the locks that have the cuts 1 through 6 only, we want to go ahead and try those locks and make sure that our key will work okay in those locks. Okay, so our third key worked. Cuts 2, 4, 2, 3, 1, 3. So we want to go ahead and cut all of these cuts on both sides of the key. You know, the way we're going to make cuts 7 and 8 this time is we're going to progression the cuts down. And so we have to go back to our AutoSmart domestic book. Okay, now that we know what key will open the door and work the door locks, we can come back and progression the last 2 cuts of the key. So we use this chart here to do this. And you go by the number 6 cut. That was the last cut we had on our key, was a 3. So we go to the number 3 depth. Okay, so we would use this chart right here to progression our key. Because our number 6 cut is a 3, this is the right one to use. So it's very important that you get the number 6 cut right. If you go through all this whole process and it doesn't work, 2 things have probably happened. Either your code machine's off, you're not cutting the keys accurately, or the number 6 cut is not a 3, it's something else. Could be 2, could be 4, whatever. But this will normally work if you got your door key made accurately, your number 6 cut is correct. So what we would do, take our key that was cut to 242313 and we would add cuts in the 7 and 8 positions as number 1 and 2. 7 cut would be 1, 8 cut would be 2. And we would try that, put those cuts on both sides of the key. And then try that key in the ignition. If it doesn't turn it, we would cut the number 8 cut to a 3. Try that. If that doesn't work, we would cut the number 7 cut to a 2 and try that. And the number 7 cut to a 3, try that. Number 7 cut to a 4, try that. Number 7 cut to a 5, try that. Number 8 cut to a 4 and try that. If none of these worked, we would take a new key and put the first 6 cuts on there, 242313, and start over. 7 cut would be a 2, 8 cut a 2. If that didn't work, go to a 2, 4, and you continue on down and progression those cuts deeper and deeper until you find a key that works. Okay, so again, we ended up with a working key. Now this is a second way to go about it. The first method we used reader tools to get the first 6 cuts, and then we used a fill program. Now if we had no access to a fill program, we still could have come to our chart in our book and made the key just as I showed you just now. I also want to tell you about the arrow tryout keys for the Ford 8-cut door locks where the spaces are 1 through 6. They work almost the same as the Baxter keys. One difference is that the arrow keys are divided into 3 boxes. And if you can read the first tumbler, then you can narrow down your search. So that if the first cut is the first tumbler is a 1 or a 2, the key should be in the A box. If it's a 3 or a 4, it should be in the B box. And then if it's a 5, it should be in the C box. Now, if you cannot get a key to work at all in the lock, and you've done everything correctly, maybe it's time to check your space and depth on your key blank and make sure that your machine is cutting accurately. And there's a couple of places to get that information. We could use our Fast Facts books, or we could use our AutoSmart books, or we could also look at the card that comes with our code machine. This is the card for the Ford 8-cut key. Here we can see the depth information, the space information, and of course there's a drawing here to help make sure that you measure from the right spot. With most double-sided keys, you do not measure from one side of the key to the other when measuring depth, but you'll measure from one of the grooves. It's in the center of the key blank. There's a nice groove that you can hook your dial caliper under to measure the depths with. You'll have the same groove on both sides. Now we know with this key we were cutting, the first cut was a 2, and so again we will measure from this edge right here, this groove right here, not from the outside edge but from this groove. 211 thousandths, 210 thousandths is what I'm measuring on this number 2 cut. And according to the card, it should be 211 thousandths. If we look right here, we can see that the number 2 cut should measure 211 thousandths, and the cut is basically right on that. Okay, so these are the spaces here, and we're going to just go ahead and we'll check the number 1 space at 845 thousandths from the tip of the key. When I get on the key, this would be the number 1 cut right here. So we try to hold the caliper so that one side is on the tip of the key, and then we'll just bring it into the center, and probably getting pretty close right there. So that's 845 thousandths, and again, if you look right here, that was pretty close to the very center of that cut. The shallow cuts you can find the centers of, I think, easier than the deeper cuts. So I normally will use a shallower cut to check my spacing. One thing about many automotive key blanks that you want to keep your eye on is that when you cut the key, it will pull it back away from the stop. And depending on the quality of the key blanks, some are worse for this problem than others, but I have seen some key blanks that are very difficult to keep the tip up against the stop, and that's going to throw the spacing off. So again, something to keep your eye on is, does that key move at all as you're cutting it? In this next part of the course, we're going to make a key for a Ford 10-cut lock, both a door lock and an ignition lock. And we're going to start by going to a salvage yard and pulling the locks from an automobile. Now, I'm not going to go into detail on how to pull the locks. As I said at the start of the course, I do not normally pull locks from automobiles anymore. I try to make the key with the lock in place. But we are going to use tryout keys, and we're going to get a working key for the door and then a working key for the ignition. And the primary reason for getting that at the salvage yard is so I can turn the ignition lock and remove it, and then I can bring both locks, the door lock and the ignition lock, back to the shop, and we can continue with our course. Ford 10-cut locks were used from 1984 to 2002. They were manufactured by Hurd and All Lock. The wafers are only on one side in these locks. They use a sidebar ignition. The ignition lock has cuts 5 through 10. The door lock has cuts 1 through 6. Both the door and the ignition locks use cuts 5 and 6. The test key is H60. We're going to be working with a 1999 Ford Contour, and we're going to be using the tryout keys TO40 to make the door key and TO3 to make the ignition key. Okay, we're going to use the tryout keys on the door and see if we can find one that'll fit this lock. We have to try both sides of the key. The tumblers are only on one side in this lock. They're not opposing tumblers or opposing wafers, so we have to, the keys have two different cuts, one on one side, one on the other. You always want to do this on the driver's side door. You need a lock that is pretty worn down to make this work. Also, use some lock lube. Okay, so we have a working key. It's number 3A. So this will allow us to go ahead and get the key now for the ignition lock. Okay, so now we're going to go to this TO3 on the arrow key set, and we're going to have to get the A set of keys, and one of these keys should turn the ignition lock because we had an A key that turned the door lock. Now this set of tryout keys has 13 keys total, which is 26 keys really, because we have to try both sides of the keys. Starting with number 1. Number 1 didn't work. Do number 2. Number 2 didn't work. Number 3. And there we go. We only have to try 3 of the 13 keys. And so now we have the tryout keys for both the door lock and the ignition lock. Okay, now in making the Ford 10-cut lock, we're going to use the arrow lock tryout keys. And for the door lock, we're going to use arrow set number 40, TO40. And again, just like with the Baxter keys, the arrow keys come with instructions, and basically if you follow the instructions, you're going to end up with a working key. You can see that, again, there's 3 pages or so of instructions, and then we have the different cuts that are on each key, and I'm going to demonstrate now using the Ford 10-cut lock how to make a key using the tryout keys. Now with this set of tryout keys, the TO40, you can see that there's a number on the upper half of the key. The half or the side that has, and when I say side now, I'm like a top side and then bottom side. Okay, the top side has the mark 3A, so this would be considered side 1. The bottom would be side 2. Only one side is working the lock in this particular lock. All of the wafers are on one side. They're not opposing wafers like we had in the Ford 8-cut lock that we did. So we need to know which side of the key is working the lock, and it is the side 1 that turned the lock. So that's the second step. The first step is to find the key that turns the lock. The second step then would be to identify which key and which side of the key was actually doing the work to turn the lock, and we know it's 3A, side 1. Even though this key turns the lock, it doesn't turn it smoothly. It's not the correct key. We don't want to just copy this key and give it to the owner. We want to try to make a key that turns the lock smoothly and is the right key for the lock. Even though this works, it's not the exact right cuts that we need on the key. Okay, now coming back to my instructions that come with the tryout keys, again the key is 3A and it's side 1, so it's going to be these cuts here. This is side 2 here. But one of these cuts, one of these key cuts should be the exact correct cuts for this lock. Now there's 2 ways to proceed from here. We can look and see, okay, what is the smallest cut for each position. And again, we're looking at positions 1 through 6. Even though this is a 10-cut key, the door keys only use 6 cuts, and then the ignition lock only uses 6 cuts. The door keys, remember, use the first 6 cuts, and the ignition lock uses the last 6 cuts. So if we look at the first cut, the smallest number is 1. Number 2 cut, the smallest is 3. The next one is 1. The next one is 3, then it's a 1, and then it's a 1. So we could cut this to the shallowest cut and try to impression the key. And our cuts would be 1, 3, 1, 1-3-1-1. The other thing that we can do is to progression the key, which means to simply start with the shallowest cuts and not impression it, but progression, meaning that we're going to just continue to make the cuts deeper, working with what we know is supposed to be the correct cuts until we find one that works smoothly. Now, when we start cutting the key, if we're going to progression the key down, we're going to do one cut, then another cut, and so on, progression it down. We would start by doing this first one, 1-3-1, 3-2-1, on one side of the key. Now, there's only one number difference here. This number 6 cut is a 2 here. So if this first key doesn't work, then we would go back with the same key and cut this number 6 cut to a 2 and try this key. If that doesn't work, then we will cut 1-3-2, 3-1-1 on the other side of the same key. And again, the next series of cuts, there's only a difference of 1 on the number 6 cut. And so we can get 1, 2, 3, 4 of these combinations on one key. So I'm going to go ahead and to my van, and I'm going to just go through these cuts and cut these, and then I'll find out which one it is and bring it back. Okay, so what I found was this 5th one, 1-3-2, 4-2-1, fits the lock perfectly. So we now know what the door lock is, 6 cuts of the door lock, and we know the first 2 cuts, cuts number 5 and 6, are the first 2 cuts of the ignition lock. So that's what we have on this key. 1-3-2, 4-2-1. And so, and you see, if I put that up, it's not going to turn. It won't turn. It's got to go down. Again, if I put it up like that, it won't work. It has to be the side that's down works this lock, like so. So we know the key now for the door. And we're going to go ahead and we can cut this on both sides of the key, and we would have a working key for the door. So we know that at the salvage yard, key 3A would turn the lock. And it really turns it pretty good too. These cuts could be very close. But we'll go to our directions now for this particular key, which is from the set TO3, Aero set TO3. And we'll get the last 4 cuts for the ignition lock. Make sure they're the right cuts. Okay, so we know our first 6 cuts for our door lock, 1-3-2, 4-2-1. Our ignition lock, again, is going to use cuts 5 and 6 through 10. So if we can identify the other 4 cuts, 7, 8, 9, and 10, then we can complete our key. This set consists of 102 keys. They're grouped into boxes of 6 different boxes, and we already saw that out at the salvage yard that the key that we had for the ignition or for the door was A3, and so we went to the A box, and it was only a coincidence that the key out of the A box was also A3 for the ignition. It could have been A12, A13, A6, but it was just a coincidence that it was A3. And then again, if you go through your instructions, it will show you exactly or tell you how to make the key. And there is something I want to point out though that is significant. And first it'll say to make the door key. It'll tell you how to go about making a door key, and then it'll tell you to do exactly what we did once you got the door key, then identify the tryout key for the ignition. But one thing here I want to point out on this is it says that the side of the tryout that is actually working the lock is the top side as you insert it into the ignition. Note which side this is. That is not correct with this particular case. In this particular case, the part that's working the lock is down. here's our lock. And one thing you want to do is, I'll say many times throughout this course, is don't take anything for granted. The information that's in the books may apply to many locks, but it's not going to apply to every possible lock. Now, one thing you're going to need is a scope, and so you can look in the locks. Now, if you don't have a scope, you can just use a flashlight or whatever. But you can get a little scope like this off the internet for $25, $35, something like that. Has a little extension on the end, so you can get in there and press the wafers and so on, and you can get in there, and it lights up so that you can. You're not going to be able to see this on the camera, but give you some idea maybe that by lighting that up and having the probe in there, again, that's much better than not having it. Okay, now this is the way this lock was situated in the car. This was the top, this was the bottom. And I'm going to try to use a scope to look into this lock and let you see that the working part of the key was down, that the springs are pushing the wafers up from the bottom, not down from the top, but they're being pushed up from the bottom. And that's why it's important that you understand how the wafer lock works, so that if you get some directions that are not quite right, and they're not going to be for every lock, there's too many different locks out there, that you're going to be able to figure out what you need to know to be able to make that key successfully. So let's get the scope and see what we can see inside this lock. Okay, I'm going to take a scope and just try to show you the inside of this lock. And I believe you can see that if I can get the scope in there just right, we can see all those wafers on the bottom. So I think that's a pretty good view right there. And that's what you're going to expect to see, when you look in there. If you got, all the wafers on one side. Now, if you have opposing wafers, then you're going to have some on the top and some on the bottom. But these wafers are all on the bottom. I think that's a pretty good picture. Probably about the best I'm going to get with this scope to show you. I'll try to push a few of them down and see that one go down. If I can press them down. So that's the working side. Of the lock. Okay, now we know the working side of the lock is down. So with the key in there, it doesn't work like this. We turn the key over. Again, this is the tryout key. It works this way. So we know it's the bottom side of the key that is doing the work. And on this set, A3, if you hold the bow to your left with the number on the key facing you, the top is side 1 and the bottom is side 2. And it was side 1 that was actually working the lock. In the car, it was in the car like this. And again, the working part of the key was on the bottom. And so, you can put it in there and just hold your hand on that part of the bow. Here it's not the top part, it's the bottom part. Take it out, keep your hand on that part of the bow, flip it around. Okay, it's this side here. It's this side here. Okay, we know the key was A3, so we know that using side 1, which are these cuts here, that one of these combinations of cuts should turn our ignition lock. The key for the door we found was 132421. So we don't really need to look at every combination. We just need to look at combinations where the first 2 cuts of the key are 2 and then 1. Cuts number 5 and 6 on the key are 2, 1. And we can see that there's only 2 possible combinations. One of these cuts should work the ignition lock. So What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my van and I'm going to cut the first cut, and we'll see if that works. If that doesn't work, I'm going to go ahead and do the second one, and then I'm going to bring that back. Okay, I'm back from cutting this key, and I did exactly what I said. I cut 212, 312. It did not work. So then I just progressioned it down to 212, 422. I only used one side of the key like that, and you can see that it works smoothly. So now we have the rest of our cuts, and we can make a complete key. We had 1, 3, 2, 4, 2, 1, and now we know that the last 4 cuts are 2, 4, 2, 2. So we'll just go ahead and write those on here. 2, 4, 2, 2. Okay, so here's the key with all of the cuts on the key, and you can see that it works the ignition lock. I can turn it either way. The cuts are the same on both sides. Works the ignition lock. Here's our door lock. You can see that it works the door lock fine. You can check both sides of the key, but this key is perfect. Okay, well that concludes the generation of this key for the Ford 10-cut lock. And we're going to move on to the next part of this course. I have a job to go on to make a key for 89 F350. And if we look at our book, in our AutoSmart book, it does not list 350, it has a 250 Super Duty. And I'm pretty sure that this will be the same as the 350, but once I get on the site, I'm going to take my scope and scope the locks and make sure that they are the 5-pin locks. And if they are, which again I'm pretty sure they are, we're going to use our tryout keys to make the keys for that vehicle. So I'm going to let you see me actually on the site using the tryout keys, and then once I have a working key, I'm going to come back to the shop and finish a process of making the actual key so that we can get some pretty good video of what the process is like. But if we look here, for the 89 F350, again it shows one key for the ignition and one key for the door. The ignition would be an H51, and the door would be an H50. Shows space and depth chart of F, and then making the first key of 2. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Okay, on the F, you see it is the 5-cut pin tumbler lock, 5 depths. Again, it shows the keys of the H50 and the H51. This is the H50, this is the H51. So, if we look at the page here for suggestions on how to make the first key, first suggestion is to use tryout keys. Second is to impression. Third is to remove the lock and disassemble it and decode the pin tumblers just like you would in a regular residential pin tumbler lock. But we're going to use the tryout keys, arrow keys, TO1 and TO2. TO2 is for the door, TO1 is for the ignition. Now there is some differences on which keys fit the door. And so I want to point that out to you, that up to 1980, from 1967 to 1980, one key fit both the ignition and the door, and then if it was a vehicle that had a trunk, there was a separate key for the trunk. But in 1981 models, they changed that, and they have one key for the ignition, the primary key, and then a secondary key would be doors and trunk. So you want to pay attention to that, because if you have the earlier one, ignition and door, this would be the TO1 set. the arrow TO1, not TO2. Whereas with this, the TO2 set would fit the doors and the TO1 the ignition. So we're going to go on out to the site and find out which key works the locks. The Ford 5-cut pin tumbler lock can be found in use from models starting in 1965 and going up through 1991. The 5 pins are on the top in the door and they're down in the ignition. For the models 67 through 80, the test key was H51 for the ignition and the door, and H50 for the trunk. From 1981 to 91, the H51 fit the ignition and the H50 the door and trunk. The tryout keys for the primary key are TO1 or the Baxter 81FA. The tryout keys for the secondary key are the Arrow TO2 or the Baxter 81FB. Okay, there's a motorhome here. It's on a Ford truck, an Econoline 350 truck. They've lost all the keys to this vehicle. We're going to need door keys, ignition keys. Okay, for the as I said, for the doors and the ignition, we're going to use tryout keys. This is the Arrow set of tryout keys, number TO2 for the doors, and the key is cut on both sides. Now on the doors, on this particular Ford lock, on the doors, the pins are on the top. So we put the key in and we try it. If it doesn't work, we take it out and we turn it over because there's cuts on both sides. And that way you get 2 different combinations on each key. Take the key you try out, put it in this other box here, and you just go through them until you find the key that works. Like so. There's only 70 keys in the box, or 140 combinations. You can go through all of them in less than probably 5 minutes. Okay, so after about 50 keys, I found the key that worked. Okay, we're going to use the Arrow keys, the 2 TO1 set of keys for the Ford, again the Ford 5-pin. This is for the ignition, and we do it just like on the door. The only thing to remember is that on this ignition, the pins are on the bottom. Now the key has cuts on 2 sides, so we have to put it in and try the key. If it doesn't work, give it a good little wiggle, give it a good try, take it out, turn the key over, put it back in, and try it again. Now on your Arrow TO1 and TO2 tryout sets, the actual keys that work the cars have 5 depths, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. But the tryout keys are cut to 1.5, 3, and 4.5, which they call their high cut, medium cut, and low cut. So the highest cuts would look something like this. The next cut down would be the medium, and then the next cut down would be the low. This would be another medium cut, and then a high cut. So this would actually be cut at 1.5, 3, 4.5. So what we need to do is when we get a working key is we need to convert it and make the actual correct cuts on the key. We really shouldn't give the customer a key that has half cuts on it. We need to put the correct cuts on it. Now this is the key, the top part of this key, this side up here, is the key that worked the lock for the door. This key has no medium cuts on it. It's got low, low, high, low, high. So that's it's kind of unfortunate. We prefer to have some 3 cuts because the 3 cuts, the medium cuts, are normally the correct cuts. So here I have to figure out all 5 cuts. Now if I look at the other side of the key, this is the wrong side. It's not what we're working with, but I want to show for an example. Here you can see high cut, medium cut, low cut. The medium cuts, which are number 3 cuts, those are okay. And it's nice if you get a key that has a couple of 3 cuts on it because those are the actual cuts. You don't have to wonder if it's a 2 or a 4, it's a 3. These 2 cuts here, we would have to wonder about. But back on our key, all we have are low cuts and high cuts. So we don't know if these are 4s or 5s on these 3 cuts, and we don't know if these are 1s or 2s on these 2 cuts. So what we should do then is cut a key, and we're going to cut 4s here and 1s here. So we're going to go 4, 4, 1, 4, 1, and see if we get impression marks. And then if we get impression marks, we know we have to lower those down, the 4s to 5s and the 1s to 2s. Okay, so I'm going to cut a key like that, and then I'll bring it back and show you the results of that. Okay, hopefully we can see on the video a mark here on cut number 3 and a mark here on cut number 2. Now, just to be careful, I would just take down one at a time. The number 3 cut, the mark is the strongest there, so I'm going to cut that down to a 2. It's a 1 now. We're going to cut it to a 2, and let's try the key there and just see how that works before we cut any more. But we'll probably have to cut the number 2 down to a 5. Okay, so I made this one cut, the number 3 cut, down to a 2, and the key works better. It works pretty good, but it still doesn't feel quite right, so I'm going to go ahead and cut this spot down to a 5. So we're going to try that at 4, 5, 2, 4, 1, and we'll see what that does. Okay, this key, when I cut the number 2 cut to a 5, I got a 4, 5, 2, 4, 1. The key works perfect. And so we made the door key, and then the ignition key is exactly the same. So I'm not going to spend any more video time on showing this. It's the exact same process for the ignition. The only difference is, as I said before, that on the ignition the pins are down. And so when you put the key in, you have to remember that to put it in so the cuts are down when you're making your key. This is a list of suppliers that will supply you a key code when given a VIN number. Now these, as far as I know, are all still in business at this time. I have noticed that over the past couple of years some suppliers have gone out of business, but I believe this list is still fairly accurate. There could be others, and I would suggest going on the internet and doing a search for VIN to key code suppliers. This is probably going to be one of the shorter parts of this course, but it's a very significant part in that probably half the keys made today for automobiles are made this way. The locksmith goes to the site, gets the VIN number and the paperwork that they need to have. They call a supplier. They get the key code. They get the cuts of the key. They get the PIN number if there's a PIN number they need. They make the key, and then, if necessary, program the key, and they're through. If there's no programming, the whole process can take less than 15 minutes. I'll zoom in here on the list. I have 14 different suppliers on this list. And again, as I said, as far as I know, they're still all in business at this time. I'm actually signed up with 3 different suppliers. Sometimes the supplier will be very busy and it takes a long time to get through. I'll go to a second supplier or a third supplier, see if I can get the code I need as quickly as possible. Now, some things you want to ask when you contact these suppliers, and most of the information is probably available on their websites if you want to simply go to their websites, but what you want to find out are the days and hours they're available, what models, and also what price are the codes per model. They're not the same for every model. I'll show you some common prices and models in a moment. Are PIN numbers included for the one price? And will they give you the cuts of the key? They're going to give you the key code, and you can look up the cuts yourself, but if they'll simply give you the cuts, it will save you a step and speed things along. Now, there are codes for other manufacturers available, but of the ones that I recommend a new locksmith start out with, you can see that the codes are available for Chrysler products from 1990 on for a cost of about $12 each. Ford, it says 2002 up, but those really are available going back further, and I have found them back to 98, and possibly they could be available even into 97. So if you have a Ford older than 2002, just call your supplier and check on those. Currently, I'm paying $14 per code with Ford. General Motors is available for 2000 and up. They're more expensive. They're $35 per code. Honda, 1990 and up. Nissan, 1998 and up. And Toyota, 1990 and up, all for about $12 at the current time. Now, you want to remember that these later model years are going to have transponders, and many are going to have high security keys. So you need to check and make sure that you have the capability to make the key before you take the job. Okay, we're on a job here to make a key for this Ford F-250. I've got the paperwork filled out. I got the VIN number. I'm going to call the key code supplier, get the key code, cut the key, and we should be done here in 15 minutes. Okay, the vehicle ID is 1, Frank, Thomas, Nancy, Frank, 2, 0, Larry, 5. That's 2000 F-250 Super Duty truck. Okay, the code is 1384X. And you can give me the cuts of the key, please. Got the card in there. I got the key loaded up. Got the right cutter on the machine. We're going to cut this, and we'll be done in just a couple of minutes. Okay, so we're going to check this key right here, right now. You can see that it works it fine. It works the ignition. We're good to go. Okay, now we're going to see if it'll turn the ignition. Turns it fine. So our job is done. Total time here on the job about 15 minutes. The primary focus of this course has been generating car keys from scratch. But I want to take a few minutes and talk about transponders because most of the cars made since 2000 have transponders in them. However, I don't want you to think that you cannot do automotive work without a programmer. General Motors used a security system for many years that did not involve a transponder. We'll learn more about that in the next course. Also, many cars have onboard programming. There are many locksmiths working today that still have not bought a programmer, so you don't really have to have a programmer. However, if you really want to get serious about automotive locksmithing, you're going to want to get one sooner or later. This is a Ford key, and I've cut it apart to get this transponder out of it so we can see what a transponder is. This is a larger transponder. Many of them are quite smaller than this, but most people still do not realize that cars that are made today have transponders in them. And I say cars made today, probably 90% of the cars that are manufactured today in the United States have transponders in them. Not every single car has a transponder, but most of them do. So we need to understand what a transponder is and how it works. Here's a closer look at it. Again, they come in different shapes. This is not the only shape that you'll find. They're different shapes and different sizes, but they basically work the same way. Most of them do not need a battery to function, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. This again is a Ford key, and we saw that there was, there's a chip in the key. Have a drawing here that, okay, we see that the key goes into the ignition. Now, around the ignition will be a ring called a transceiver ring. It both transmits and receives signal. And when you put the key in and turn the key, this will happen just in a thousandth of a second or less even. There'll be a signal from the transceiver which will energize the transponder. The transponder will respond with the signal, and if it's the correct signal, which will come back and be received by the transceiver ring and then sent to the encoder, if it's the correct signal, then the car is allowed to start. But if it's not the correct signal, then the car is immobilized. And so that's why they call the unit that controls all of this process an immobilizer. So if we make a new key, and normally when you get called out to make keys for a car, they've lost all the keys. That's why they're calling. So if it's a key with a transponder or a chip in it, then you're going to have to program it. There's three possible variations for programming. One, many cars have what's called onboard programming. And the way it works is the car can program itself. You simply put the key in, wait for a specified period of time, cycle the key on and off, and wait for another specified period of time, and the car will program itself. And there's instructions for different cars on how the self-programming works and how long you should have to wait for it to program and so on. So that's called onboard programming. Now, if it does not have onboard programming, and most cars today that are coming out today do not have onboard programming, you're going to need a programmer. And we'll talk about programmers in just a minute. But a programmer basically is a computer that you can hook into the OBD port on the car and program your new key to the immobilizer. Some cars you cannot program the keys. They're dealer only. Primarily Mercedes, BMW, and Volvo, and potentially others out there. There's always new things coming out. There's new cars being made every year, and it's always worth checking every car. Before we take a job, we need to get all the information we can about the car. Starting out, if you're new to automotive locksmithing, my suggestion is to stay away from these more sophisticated cars. All the cars can be difficult to start with. You're going to find that onboard programming does not work probably 25% of the time, even though it says that it should work. The programmers will not work all of the time. So there's enough problems just with these first two categories without accidentally getting into a car that you cannot program. I want to show you three different manufacturers of programmers. The Hickok machine is designed to program Ford and the Ford line of products, Ford, Lincoln, Mercury vehicles. This was one of the first manufacturers of programmers, and Ford was the first American automaker to put chips in their keys. And many locksmiths started out with getting this machine, and it's not a bad way to start for anybody really, to stick with the Ford, Lincoln, Mercury vehicles and just do transponder keys for those vehicles only, especially for a few months or a year or whatever, just to learn how to do it. This is not a bad way to go. This machine costs $1,950. They also have a version of their software that can run on your laptop, and that's another possibility. It's several $100s cheaper if you use your own laptop. Now, one thing I want to point out here, and you're going to see this with other programmers also, is that they talk about an upgrade here. If you have the old style Hickok NGS machine, you can upgrade from this for $699 and get to where you can again program the latest Ford, Lincoln, Mercury vehicles. But this is one thing to think about, is upgrades for your machine. I'm going to talk about that more in just a minute. But again, this is for the Ford, Lincoln, Mercury line only. And that is, it has a low price to, comparatively speaking, it's a low price to get into programming, but it has the limit of the cars that it can program. Okay, the next programmer I'd like to look at is called the TKO, Transponder Key Originator. This is made by Silka, which is a division of Ilco. They have a couple of packages. They have the larger package, which includes most vehicles, sells today for right at $8,000. They have a smaller package, what they call their basic package, that sells for $3,235. Now again, just like with the Hickok machine, if you buy either one of these packages, you can program all of the cars that you have the software to program. And then as you need upgrades, you should expect to have to purchase upgrades at some time in the future. But both of these packages are worth considering, and I'll come back and talk about some ideas about this more in just a minute. Another machine that's made by Advanced Diagnostics, and this is the machine that I showed you earlier in the resources and tools section, the MVP Pro machine, is a pay-as-you-go machine. In that you only, once you purchase the machine, you pay per use. Now, at the current time, the machine sells for $3,400 and it includes 35 tokens. Most cars take one token. You could end up using 2 tokens on some cars, so either 1 or 2 tokens per vehicle. But if you could do cars for just 1 token, the original purchase, you'd be able to do 35 cars or program the keys to 35 cars. When your 35 tokens are used up, you have to buy more tokens. And again, this is at current prices as this video is being made. If you buy only 10 tokens, they're $400 or cost you $40 per token. If you buy a larger amount, you get a discount. For $825, you can get 25 tokens, which brings it down to $33 per token. At 50 tokens for $13.50, it's $27 per token. And for $3,000, you can get 250 tokens at $12 per token. Now, to make this machine cost effective, I really think if you want to buy this machine, you have to buy the tokens in quantities of 250 to get the cost down. If you cannot afford to do this, you probably should look at the other machines because this machine would not be really cost effective. Now they do make another machine, which is called the T-Code. Again, this is basically the same machine, but you own the software here and you don't need a token. You can use the software in the machine all you want. As long as it will handle the car that you're working on, you're good to go. And they have different packages. They have a beginner package for the current time is $2,300. They have an apprentice program for which is 21 software packages at $6,900. Then it jumps to a journeyman package which includes 26 softwares for $7,800, and then the whole program, everything, 38 software programs, right at $9,000. And you can start out with the beginner and then add other softwares as you want them. And you simply hook to your computer, go online, hook into Advanced Diagnostics website and pay for the program, and you can download it right to your machine. So there's a couple of different ways to go. I think one of the first things that you really need to look at is what cars will you be working on, because we're talking a lot of money here, and so you don't want to just go out and spend $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 in equipment that you don't need to spend. Personally, I really recommend as a beginner you only work on to start out with the American models, the Ford line, General Motors, Chrysler, and then look at the Honda, Toyota, and the Nissan line, those 6 lines of vehicles. And only when you've mastered those begin to branch out in other lines. Now there is very good money in making keys for the high-end cars, but it does require a degree of experience, and it requires the right equipment, and also it requires a key that you can actually program to the car. In other words, it's not a dealer-only program. On the T-Code Pro, the beginner package is only $2,300, but that does not include any software. It just includes the machine and basic accessories. Now, they do allow you to purchase software at a 35% discount, but the $2,300 price, you're not going to be able to program anything until you buy some software. With the apprentice program, it includes 21 softwares. So you can do quite a few cars with the $6,900 package. And again, you own the machine, you own the software, you don't have to ever worry about buying tokens again. This is not a bad way to go, and then you could add softwares later on as you felt that you needed those. So those are a couple of things to think about. There's a list that shows which softwares go to which packages and so on. And again, I would stay away from the high-end cars starting out. If you were gonna get one of these packages, I really would probably just go with the apprentice package starting out. At the most, a journeyman. I would not get the master package at $9,000 starting out. Okay, I want to talk about the Silka TKO programmer again for just a minute, and I'd like to offer you something to think about. That for a beginner locksmith, it takes a long time to master automotive locksmithing, and there's no need to try to rush into it. It's just something, there's just so many different variations of different locks, so many things to learn. It just takes a while. And so I really would recommend not spending a lot of money on a programmer right out of the chute. Let's take a look at this basic package here with Silka. $3,235. It does Chrysler, does the basic Ford softwares, does the basic GM, includes Honda, most of the Hondas, the basic ones, and your basic Toyota packages. What it doesn't have on here is a Nissan package, and so if I were going to buy this particular programmer, I would add the Nissan, probably about $300 more, so say around $3,500. You could get this package plus the basic Nissan software. That's what I would look at, as compared to if you go with only, if we back up over to the Hickok programmer at basically a $2,000 investment, which again, if that's all a person has to get started with, that's not a bad way to go. But if you could figure out a way to go on the about $3,500, you could do not only the Ford products, but also Chrysler, GM, Toyota, Honda, and Nissan. Now, if you say, well, I got more money than that I can afford to spend, and so maybe you look up here at the Silka full package for $8,000, or you look at the T-Code for about the same price. I would like to offer an idea to consider. If you, instead of spending $8,000 here, buy the basic package here, and then purchase the MVP Pro machine for the $3,400. This will do any car out there that can be programmed. And this is actually what I ended up doing after several years of being involved and studying all the different cars and the different softwares and everything else. I actually ended up using the TKO It was originally called the SDD, the Silica Diagnostic Device. And so if you hear SDD, that's the same as TKO today. But for about $6,500, $7,000, you can get this TKO basic package, and you can use it all you want. Doesn't cost you any additional money for the cars that I'm going to recommend that you work on. Just start with that. And then if you have additional money to spend, go with the MVP Pro, only if you can afford later on to buy the tokens 250 or more at a time. Because you have to get the cost of those tokens down in order for you to make some money. And this is the reason I like this, to have this machine with me, is it doesn't matter who calls me. If that car can be programmed, this machine will program it. All you have to do is plug it into your computer once a month and get the latest updates or upgrades from the company, and they come right, there's no charge. They keep it programmed for you at no charge. Once you own the machine, all you have to do is buy the tokens. Now that's a real advantage, and the reason I recommend that is because oftentimes you will get on a job and the car, maybe it's supposed to program itself, it won't do it. Maybe this basic package of software won't do it. But there's very few cars I've ever hooked onto with the MVP Pro where it would not program the vehicle. They have good, both Silica and the MVP Pro people have good support technicians that you can call into and get support from if there is a problem. But that's just my thinking on these programmers, and I'm going to offer that to you as what I think is a good way to go with spending your programming dollars. This is a 1999 Ford Expedition. They've lost the keys to this vehicle. We're going to call in and get the code from the vehicle ID. This is a 99. I believe they'll have the code for us. We're going to check and see, speed things along a lot. I did check the OBD port. There's no power on the OBD port, so we're going to have to use the lighter, where the cigarette lighter goes, and get power off of that to power our programmer. But it should program the keys up with no problem. Let's take a look at Michael Hyde's transponder book for the 99 Ford Expedition and see what kind of information is available to us here. Okay, so we would go to the, again, 99 Ford Expedition. We're going to be on page 174. Okay, so this is page 174. It's got 99 through 2002 Expedition. We're going to zoom in on it. And it gives the key blank information for a number of different suppliers: National Auto, Bianchi, Ilco, JMA, Jet, and Stratec. Stratec number is 598333. This is also known as an H72, is a common reference to this particular key blank. The test key, of course, is H75, being that it's an 8-cut key. And shows a dealer's key that has a different Stratec number. This is key type standard, code series 8-cut, test key 875, models all. Maximum number of keys is 8. Onboard programming, yes, but only if you have 2 existing keys. The immobilizer location is part of the instrument cluster. And then it goes into chip information, which I'm not going to get into that right now. But then it has information on cloning, if you were going to clone a key. And again, we're not going to get into talking about cloning right now. Just quite simply, cloning is where you just copy a key. You have to have a cloner, a machine that will copy all of the information off of another key. Then here at the bottom it shows what programmers will work to program. If you don't have 2 keys, you can't do onboard programming. You're going to need a programmer. It says no PIN code is required. It says that the MVP Pro, the MVP T-Code Classic will work, and then the Yoko Silca will work. That those three will work. And I have both the Silca and the MVP Pro. We're going to use the Pro on this car just to see how it works. This little tool here will check the power for you. The OBD port is right down here, and if we plug this in, the lights are on the bottom of it, but there's two lights, one for if the connection is good, one if the connection is not good, and if there's no lights come on, there's just no power to it. So as you can see, there's no power to this unit. And we were able to get the key codes from for this vehicle and make the key. Here's the key. Just cut this key. I always cut it onto an 875 blank first. This is the actual 872 key with the chip in it, and ready to program these in because it works all of the locks just fine, including all the doors, and the ignition works them fine. We're going to look in our advanced diagnostics manual to find out what information we can get on this Ford Expedition 99. We turn here in the front. They have basically all of the models listed, and this is the Ford section, and here is the Expedition. Let me zoom in on that. Okay, so we can see that here in this row here, this is for the 99, and the type of system that it has is what's called HEC, and it's not really real significant, and we understand every one of those, but we want to go to that section of the book that we're going to program this HEC system. You notice some of them are patch 1, some are PCM, some are patch 3, 4, 5, or patch 2, or whatever. We're working with the HEC system. And then it's going to tell us again the key blank. And one of the biggest problems, the most common problem probably in programming keys to cars, is not having the correct blank. So if you have any problems, you really want to check and double check and make sure that you have the correct blank. And this is the 598333 or H72PT. And then it tells us that there is no pin number required to do this. So now we're going to look back further into the book, into the Ford section, to deal with this and see what we can find about this HEC system. Okay, so this is the Ford section of the book, and it's going to be like a Ford basic. We're going to be in just the basic part of the programming. It says HEC patch 1 and 2, patch 3 and 4, CAN, PCM, and then SCIL. And I'm not going to try to get into explaining all of that. We just need to know right now that we had the HEC system. And so we're going to look through to find about where it talks about programming for that particular system. And it's worthwhile to really spend some time studying this so you're familiar with kind of what is in what's position in the book. Okay, now notice on this page, to program keys, what you need to program keys, it shows you what is needed if you have the MVP and T-Code Classic or the Pro. With this situation, with this Expedition, we're going to need this dongle here. These are called dongles. That we're going to need the black one or the A one. And then if you look through your book, you'll find different information, different tips, and so on, depending on what it is you're trying to do. But there are special notes for the HEC. And it says this notice only applies to owners that do not have a Ford Advanced software. And so depending on which software you have, it says models that use HEC ICM or VIC systems all require all key present for programming, or they will be erased during the 10-minute wait period. So you have to know that with certain softwares, the keys are going to be erased. and you're going to need 2 keys to program back in there. Most Ford products require at least 2 keys programmed in to operate properly. So again, get familiar with all of the literature that comes with your programmer, and there'll be tips there to help you program the key successfully. We're going to back up to this other page here for just a minute. Ford HEC, ICM, BCI, SCIL. Use this method to erase keys. Use this method for adding keys. And so we have a page, and it has the different screenshots that you will see on the programmer as you go through programming it. Just to turn the page and show you that if we went further, it would go into the patch 2 systems. So we don't want to be on that page because we already established the fact that this is the HEC system. And so as we go through it, you're going to see these different screens. Starting with, we're going to choose Ford, and then we're going to make a vehicle selection, USA. Verify the system type from the model application guide. And we already looked in the model application guide first thing. And then we come down vehicle selection and we choose the HEC. And then a screen will come up, it'll say PATS. Then we go back to the next row here. Diagnostic menu, go to special functions. And then there's some notes. It says ECU identification to display this, fault codes to check fault codes, special functions, program keys. And that's what we're interested in, is programming keys. So we would select that. Make your selection and press enter. Then the diagnostics menu says add a key. And then there's some notes. The add key function will only appear if you have purchased the Ford Advanced software package. Otherwise, you will only be able to clear or erase keys. And we're going to see what happens with this. It says, if you have the smart card and the Mazda CAN, you can bypass the 10-minute wait. And then timed access, and there'll be a 10-minute wait if you don't have the software to bypass that. And then when it says programming keys, when adding a key, you only need 1 key to cycle in the light after the 10-minute wait. You must go through the clear time wait. And clear PATS key, gaining access, time required, and so on. Access status in progress, back to stop the process. Okay, now if you have to wait for the 10-minute wait period, when that 10-minute wait period is over, or even if you don't have to have a 10-minute wait period, there's going to be a point where it's going to say to cycle the key. And when it says cycle the key, that simply means to turn the key to the on position, turn it off, and then turn it back on. You don't need to turn it to the start position. If you do accidentally turn it to start, it shouldn't hurt anything. But you simply turn the key off and on, and that completes the process of the programming. Keys program, disconnect tester from vehicle. There's notes here. Follow the on-screen prompts. Remove the key that is in the ignition after you are prompted to do so, and the key is programmed. Wait a few seconds and test your key. Sometimes it takes a few seconds for the computer to actually finish the programming process. So if you turn it right away and it doesn't start, just wait a few seconds and then try it again. Now, if you go through this entire process and the key won't program, and you've checked to make sure the battery has plenty of voltage, you've double checked to make sure you have the right key blank, you can call for tech support. On Advanced Diagnostics, they have pretty good tech support up to 8 o'clock in the evening, and that is Pacific Coast time, Monday through Friday, and then from 9 to 5 on Saturday is what they're currently offering. So they have pretty good hours for tech support if you do have a problem. Okay, so we're using the MVP Pro here. We're using the adapter to the cigarette lighter to get power. We're powered up. We're going to go with the standard software. I'm going to enter my code now. Ford, USA. We're going to go by vehicle. Let's go down to the Expedition. This is a 99. That says 99 to 02 there. We're going to click on that. Okay, it says to switch the ignition on. Let me get a hold of a key here. Okay, the ignition is switched on. Press enter. PATS SCP. We're going to go to see if we can just add a key. It doesn't want to just, normally we go to special functions. It doesn't want to just let us add a key. So we're going to go to clear and erase keys. It says one token will be used. You have to hit the check mark, hit the check mark again. Minimum keys required 2. It says keys program 4. Okay, let's see what happens here. It says can you bypass PATS bypass enabled, which will save us some time. We'll use that. PATS 3 keys program. Cycle keys to program. Okay. Okay, so we're going to see if they work now. There we go. Throughout most of this course, we have been focused on Ford automobiles and Ford locks. However, I did explain how to use the VIN number from any automobile and get the key code and make the key. So for the next part of this course, I want to branch out to a different manufacturer, and we're going to program a key to a Chrysler product. We're going to use a 2007 Dodge Dakota, and I'm going to make sure that the programming does not go smoothly. We're going to encounter some problems, and we're going to have to solve the problems to get the key programmed. The situation that you're going to see unfold with the 2007 Dakota is exactly the situation that I found myself in some years ago when I began programming Chrysler keys. And I'm sure that if I don't explain this to you, that it's quite possible that you'll find yourself in the same predicament. So this example will show you how to program a key to a Chrysler product, but it will also demonstrate some of the things that you might need to know if the programming does not go smoothly. We're going to get the basic facts about the 2007 Dodge Dakota we're going to make a key for and program. We're going to use Fast Facts this time. And the way Fast Facts works is the front has basically an index of the cars and trucks in alphabetical order by manufacturer and then by model. And so if we go to Chrysler and then go to Dodge and then we would go to Dakota, pickup would be here. That's a 2007. We're going to zoom in on this. Okay, right here, Dodge Dakota 2005, 2007. This is the code series of the locks here. M0001 through 2618. It's a 8-cut lock. The type of programming system is the SCAN, and then that really is not important for us to know right now. I'm not going to try to get into all the different types of systems that are out there to read transponders, but it basically has to do with the type of system, transponder system that's in that vehicle. And then here it says plate CH27. So we turn to CH27. Okay, this is the plate. CH27 is the one it referred us to. Notice it doesn't say Dodge, though it says Chrysler, but this is the right one. And it has a lot of information on this, part numbers and so on for the different locks. It says that when you cut the key, you gauge it from the tip. It doesn't have a shoulder to gauge from. If you want to use tryout keys, it tells you the Aero set TO93 or the Baxter set 97. If you want to try to use a reader to read the wafers in the door lock, you would be reading positions 2 through 8. This is the tumbler locations. It says the ignition is 1 through 7, door 2 through 8, trunk is 2 through 8, glove box 5 through 8. Then it has your basic space and depth information. It says that a working key would be Y159. So that's how you use this book. You simply, again, you go to the front, find the manufacturer and then the model. In the front, there'll be a plate number. Go to that plate and that'll be the information for that vehicle. Now there's a lot more information in this book. There is a help section for making keys for different vehicles. So there's a lot more than just the plates that we were looking at, but there's a whole section here to help you out and understand the keys and transponders and all kinds of things. And then in the back of this, which could come in useful if you want to get into motorcycles, there's a motorcycle, snowmobile, and ATV section, which again does the same thing as I showed you with the cars. You look up the model of the motorcycle and then you would turn to the correct plate in the back and get the pertinent information that you would need to make a key for a motorcycle. Now if we wanted to check the Michael Hyde transponder book on the 2007 Dodge Dakota, simply go to the Dodge section and we'll get to the right page here. It says for Dakota, page 142 for the 2005 through 2009. So we'll go to page 142. Then I'll zoom in on it here a little bit and we can see it closer up. But again, this is the same basic information that was presented when we looked at the Ford Expedition. Key blanks from different manufacturers, basic information about the key, test keys of Y157 or 159, max number of keys is 8, and so on. And then down at the bottom again, it'll show which programmers will work. And notice here now that it does say PIN code required. We have to have the PIN code for Chrysler products. The MVP Pro, the T code, and then the Silka will all work to program this vehicle. This 2007 Dodge Dakota pickup. We're going to make a key for this using the VIN number. We're going to call a supplier that will supply us the key code from the VIN number and simply make the key and then program the key in. And of course, being that this is a Chrysler product, we're going to ask the supplier that supplies the key code to also provide the 4-digit PIN number that we'll need to program the key. There's often 3 locations to get the VIN number from a vehicle. We can look through the windshield onto the dash, and normally you'll be able to just look in there and see the VIN number. Second location, on the driver's side door, there's often a tag on newer vehicles, and there's one down there. And then the third one would be over there in the glove box off of the registration. Okay, here's the key I cut. Called and got the code, cut the key. That whole process took less than 15 minutes. On this Dakota, the OBD port is right up here where it's real easy to get to. We'll go ahead and put our tester on that. And again, the lights are on the wrong side, so it's hard to see the lights. You can see that the correct light is on, indicates we got power and that it's okay to use that port. So we just plug in to the port with one end of the cable, the other end of the cable goes to the programmer. Okay, when it's first plugged in, it lights up. TKO comes up with a screen that says to press F1 to continue. Then we have to put a password in. Once the correct password is in, a screen will flash for just a second that says correct password. Then it shows you the volts on the vehicle, and it will come up with the main menu. We will choose the immobilizer, which is the first one right here. And we hit enter. Now we're going to go down through all these vehicles and find the Dodge Dakota. Okay, so there we have the Dodge. Now it's going to ask us to locate the correct one. Okay, this Dakota. And we want the one that says 07 through 011 because this is an 07 Dakota. We hit enter. Tells us the cable to use. We have that cable already hooked up. Hit enter. It says to insert a key and turn on the console. Okay, so there are the keys going in. We turn it on. But now we have to hit enter. So please wait connecting. Program new keys, yes. It says number of keys in memory. New key adding and so on. We can check how many keys are in memory. Number of keys is 2. Press any key. Then we're going to go program new keys. New key adding. Hit enter. It says we're going to have a PIN number. So let's put in the PIN number. PIN number for this vehicle was 6937. Okay, and it's asking for key number, how many keys we're going to put into it. Put in 1. Okay, so it says, again, it says to insert the 1 key and then hit enter. Turn the ignition on and hit enter. Ignition's on, please wait. Okay, so the screen that came up says, if the warning light on the console is blinking, repeat the procedure because an error with the keys has occurred. Then it says to press any key. I want to show you on the dash the blinking red dot that indicates a security issue with this new key. So normally when you get the keys programmed, normally something will be blinking many times and then it will go solid and either go solid or just go out. So that's something that you can pay attention to when you're programming. Okay, well the key did not program, and so this is a pretty good example of what can happen to you. It says ECU disconnected. I went back through it a second time and then it came up ECU disconnected, press any key. So we're gonna go through it again. I'm gonna unplug it and start the whole process over and we'll see if it'll do it. Okay, well I'm kind of glad this happened because this is not real unusual and it can be frustrating. Sometimes, probably most of the time, you can program these keys using either the MVP Pro or the TKO and you'll have no problems, but 20-25% of the time you're going to have situations where for whatever reason the key will not program. Okay, if a key is not programming properly, one of the first things that you may consider is putting a booster on the battery. And it's a good idea to always have one of these little booster packs with you. They're very convenient. They hold a charge for a long time. Many of the cars that you get called out to make keys for will not have been started for some time, and often the batteries are low. Consequently, if there's not enough voltage, you cannot program the keys. So I have 2 of these, and I always carry one in my van, and I always have one charging. Also, always use caution when charging a battery. I once had a battery blow up on me, and they are dangerous. One thing that's nice about these packs here is that you can hook your cables up, and then you can stand back as far as the cables will let you stand back before you turn it to on. And just a suggestion, always turn your face away from the battery when you do that. I did have a friend that was blinded in one eye by a battery blowing up. So that's something to think about when you're doing this kind of work, is always use extreme caution, extreme safety. If you're not sure how something works, it's best to get instruction before you go forward with that. Now here's a picture of what an exploded car battery looks like. And if you go on the internet and do some research, you can find quite a few pictures and stories, about this topic. Many people suffer serious eye injury every year while working around car batteries. Always follow the manufacturer's instructions when testing, charging, jumping, or doing any kind of work with or around car batteries. Okay, the next thing to do is go to our guide for our TKO and go to tips, technical tips. We look up the Dodge, which we have right here, and talks about an issue with the software here. And without reading all this to you, basically we have to take the shroud off from around the steering column, and we're going to unplug the lead that goes to the ECU box. They want us to wait 5 minutes and then plug that back in and try it again. So we'll try that. Okay, if we're going to pull the shroud apart, we're going to need to look and see what screws are holding it. I would suggest getting a mirror, a little inspection mirror. It makes it a lot easier to look up underneath the dash, and oftentimes you can tell if it's a Phillips screw or a torque head screw or just what it is you're dealing with. But here on this Dodge Dakota, there's one screw that holds on this adjustment handle for the steering column, and then there's 3 screws. These are all torque head 15 screws, one here and then 2 up underneath here. And once you got the screws out, there'll be some snaps possibly, or little catches that hold the top shroud and the bottom shroud together. Just go around and push in until they all free up, and it should come off of there fairly easily. Of course, every manufacturer and every model is different, but basically the more modern cars normally will have 2 or 3 screws on the bottom and then some snaps, and both parts will just come off. Okay, here's the black ECU box. Here's the connector down here. Again, the suggestion was to disconnect this for 5 minutes and then connect it back and try to reprogram the keys. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, now to get that wire out, I had to just go ahead and remove this, which is really no big deal. It has a screw up under here. There was 1 screw, and then it has 2 clips. Just take the screw out and take a flat blade screwdriver and loosen those clips very gently. This is all plastic, you want to be careful, but you just kind of pry up on the ends of those clips and the thing just comes off. Then I can get the wire out of that thing. Okay, we've unplugged that for a few minutes. I put it back on. We're going to see if this will program this now. It says to insert the key and turn it on. Key's in there. Please wait connecting. The warning light is out and it's programmed. Well, guess what? The warning light is not out. So that didn't work. I'm going to try it one more time, and then we're going to cut a new key for it. Okay, now this is the key that I cut for this vehicle. This is a Stratec 692352 key. It is the correct key. See the Stratec name on it. So I'm going to take that key and I'm going to lay it up on the dash up here so we know where it is and we don't confuse it with a new key that I'm going to cut. I'm going to cut another key, and I'm also going to cut a test key. Y157 test key, and we're going to try to program a new key using a test key and another Stratec 692352 key. Okay, I've got two new keys cut here. I got a Y157 test key, and then I have our chip key again. And we're going to program this again, but this time when the machine says to turn on the ignition, we're going to use this test key without the chip in it. And we're not going to insert the chip key until it says insert new key. Okay, so you can see it says insert a key and turn on the console. And again, we're using just a regular key for that. Okay, then we have to press enter. So program new keys. We're going to go to the new key adding. We have to have a pin code. We'll put the pin code in again. Now it's asking for the number of keys. We're going to put 1 and hit enter. It says insert the 1 key to be programmed and turn the ignition on. Okay, well, we had the other key in there, so we're going to take that out. And I might point out that the light on the dash is blinking up there. So, but anyway, we're going to take this key out, put in our new key, turn it on, and it says press any key. It says connecting. And it says, if the warning light on the console is blinking, repeat the procedure because an error with the keys has occurred. Now, if we look up here now, we see there is no light. Okay, so the difference is that on these Chrysler keys, you cannot put the key in until it asks you to put the key in. Chrysler keys are different in that the chip in here is what's called a read-write chip, and when you put it in here and you turn it on, it sends a signal that writes a code on here, and if you put it in too quick, it'll write the wrong code on there, and then the key is run. So kind of went through this, picked this Chrysler to show this for a couple of reasons. One, you need a pin number to program the keys, and you have to be extra careful as to when you put your new key into the ignition. But the light's out, so it should start. Now the next thing it will do, we'll unplug the programmer. Let me reach down here and do that. Notice the light's still out. Let's see if it will start. Starts, and it died. Let's try it again. Okay, the lights are out, the security lights are out up here. Nothing is flashing. Our key is properly programmed. Now your TKO will come with an operating manual, so double check and make sure that you've followed all of the steps in your operating manual and all of the tips that are in the TKO guide. But if you've double checked everything, all the tips, you've checked to make sure you have the right key, you know the battery has plenty of power, then you can go ahead and call tech support and see if you can get tech support as to why the TKO is not programming that key. One problem that I have found with the TKO is that their support is on the East Coast and they close at 5 o'clock Eastern time. So that is a bit of an issue if you need help after 5 o'clock Eastern time. But those are the steps that you would go through, and then as a last resort, you could call for tech support. We covered a great deal of information in this course. I'd like to take a couple of minutes and review some of the main concepts that were presented. We learned about the basic tools used in automotive locksmithing. We became familiar with how a wafer lock works. We became familiar with the Ford 8-cut lock, the Ford 10-cut lock, and the Ford 5-cut pin tumbler locks. We're familiar with 4 different types of readers. We looked at the Cobra reader, the Easy reader, the AccuReader, and the Lishi 2-in-1 tool. We learned how to find basic information about auto locks using AutoSmart and FastFacts. We learned how to find the model year of a vehicle from the VIN number. We learned how to actually use our readers and the impressioning process to make a key. We're able to use a fill program to complete the cuts of a key. We learned how to make a key using tryout keys and progressioning. And we learned how to read a progression chart. We know how to find the deepest wafer in a lock. We know how to determine the working side of a key. We have a basic understanding of transponders and their use. We are now familiar with 3 different kinds of programmers, and we have a general idea of how to use a programmer. In terms of practical application for what we've learned, we know that if we get a call for a Ford 8-cut lock system, we know we need to use either readers or tryout keys and make a key that fits the door lock first. Then we can simply follow the directions to make the key using either impressioning or progressioning to get the ignition key. We also saw how to use a fill program to get the last 2 cuts of the key. For the Ford 10-cut system, normally we would use tryout keys to make the key for the door first, and then use tryout keys to get the ignition key, and we're going to have to use either impressioning or progressioning to finish both keys. On the Ford 5-cut system, we know to use tryout keys. There are a different set of keys for the door and a different set for the ignition normally, so it doesn't matter which one you make first, but you use the tryout keys and simply follow the instructions using the impressioning process to complete the key. We also know that we can get the key code from the VIN number if we have a supplier that will provide that, and we can cut the key for many cars by simply doing that. I'm often asked what a person should buy first as far as tools and resources as they want to get into automotive locksmithing. I think it's pretty obvious that the first thing a person's going to have is some type of code cutting equipment, either a code machine or clippers. The next thing that you're going to want to get, I would think, would be some reference materials, something like the AutoSmart or FastFacts book. The next thing I would do would be to sign up with a VIN to key code supplier and then buy some key blanks. And I would focus at first on getting key blanks for Ford, GM, Chrysler, Honda, Toyota, and Nissan. Just by doing that and being able to get the key code from the VIN number, you're going to be able to make a lot of keys for a lot of different cars. The next thing I would probably purchase would be a wafer reader for the Ford 8-cut locks, followed by tryout keys for the Ford 8-cut door lock with the wafers in the 1 through 6 position, and then tryout keys for the Ford 10-cut door lock and the ignition lock. Now somewhere along the way, and you may want to get this before you buy your tryout keys, is to get a programmer and transponder keys. If you have a programmer, you're going to need transponder keys so you have something to program. But where exactly you put this in the list as far as a priority is going to be different for different people. Another item that I want to mention that I have not talked about at all in this course is what's called a domestic killer kit. It's a set of tools from A1 Manufacturing. And the reason that I'm going to go ahead and throw it on here is because it's about a $400 kit that I'm going to really encourage you to purchase. And we're going to look at the use of this kit in the next course, Auto 2. So I want to go ahead and put it on the list, as it is something that I think should be fairly high on the priority list of equipment to buy. The only way you're going to get good at automotive locksmithing is to practice. I would suggest trying to go to the salvage yard and get locks from the vehicles that you plan to work on. You can also buy used locks off of eBay. Remember, if you go to a salvage yard and you have to pull your own locks, you're going to have to be able to turn the ignition locks before you can remove them in most cases. That is going to involve having the right tools. Take the locks apart and study the locks. Learn how to read their wafers. Study all of the reference materials, the AutoSmart, the Fast Facts, all of the catalogs that you can get a hold of. If you have a reader tool, but you plan to call and use the VIN number to get a key code, go ahead and use your reader first and see how accurately you can read the wafers. That's a great way to get some practice, and you can get some feedback when you call and get the key code. I'd also like to suggest that you use 5x7 cards to keep notes on. Have a card for each category or type of lock. Note anything and everything about the lock and keep the cards handy to refer back to. That concludes this course. We want to thank you for buying this course. We hope you found it informative. Please visit our website at www.locksmithdvd.com and review our other courses.